A football Friday. It is going to be the biggest football Sunday of the season for the Arizona Cardinals. Because for the first time, I think, since Jonathan Gannon has taken over as the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, he is going to be under the biggest amount of pressure. This is the first pressure-packed game because when you hire a head coach, and it also depends on what state you are in as a franchise, but it applies very much to the Arizona Cardinals. When they hire Jonathan Gannon, and they hired Monty Ossenfort, right? They hired the GM in Monty Ossenfort. He picked Jonathan Gannon as the head coach after going through that search. Where this team was rock bottom. They had a roster that was completely upside down. You didn't know necessarily if you believed in the quarterback or not, and you had a bunch of moving parts. You had a bunch of holes that you needed to fill. So year one was the evaluation, not for us of Jonathan Gannon, but for Jonathan Gannon and Monty Ossenfort of the roster. And so at the end of the day, the wins and the losses didn't really matter. Listen, sports, specifically football, results-based business. But when you embark on a new journey and there's a new regime in town, they get more than one season of runway. So year one's win and loss number didn't really matter. You needed to get in there. You needed to shine a light on everything, decide where we like the guys we have in-house, which guys we don't like, which holes we think we need to fill urgently, and you put together a plan, right? Well, now we've entered the new phase of the Arizona Cardinals where, let's face it, results matter. And while this team may be ahead of schedule, while next year might have been the year that people thought we would be discussing meaningful December football games with playoff implications, it doesn't change the fact that we are here. We are in a timeline where the Cardinals are playing meaningful football games in December. And we're talking about a year in which the 49ers have given this division away. Injuries, underperformance, they're out. This division is right there for the taking for the Cardinals. The playoffs are right there for the taking for the Cardinals. There's pressure that comes with that. And you didn't have pressure last year. You didn't have pressure at the beginning of the year, although when you started the year 2-4, I think we were starting to ask questions of the results should be better than this. Then they go on the 4-game winning streak, and we say to ourselves, that's more like it. That's what this was supposed to look like. It's supposed to look better offensively, and the defense has got a bunch of injuries, but they should be able to at least stay in these football games. And then we got to the second half of the season after the bye. We got to a stretch of games that we talked about at length here on this program. How advantageous this stretch of games was for the Cardinals. Since that stretch has started, the two hardest games on that schedule were the first two up for them. They're 0-2 in those games. A loss up in Seattle, and they blew the fourth quarter lead to the Minnesota Vikings last weekend. There's pressure in both of those games. There is not going to be an amount of pressure that will match this Sunday. If you missed it, earlier in the week, we shared a statistic of how important this game is for the Cardinals. With a win, their odds to make the playoffs are in the 70s, meaning 70%. I think it was like 71%. With a loss, their odds of making the playoffs are 17. That's how important Sunday's game is. There is not a single game that Jonathan Gannon coached last season, and there is not a single game, I feel pretty comfortable saying this without actually doing the research, there's not a single game this season that Jonathan Gannon has coached in that has that type of spread, that has that type of pressure applied to it. A win, your playoff odds jump to 71%. With a loss, your playoff odds plummet to 17%. There is not a game on this schedule this season that has that type of pressure associated with it, that has that type of impact. A win, and we start plotting the course of who the Cardinals might be playing in the postseason. You lose a 3-game losing streak, we start to ask those questions that we were asking when this team is 2-4. So it is without a doubt the most pressure this regime has felt. Now, they're not going to get fired if they lose the game. They're not going to get fired at the end of the season. They have made a lot of strides to move this organization in the right direction. But you have an opportunity here to do something special. The future is not guaranteed. Sunday, you're playing an opponent that you can very easily beat. You almost beat them 2 weeks ago on the road in their building, not playing your best football. You almost were able to beat that team 2 weeks ago up in Seattle. You had the ball in the second half, driving with a chance to take the lead before Kyler Murray threw a pick six. You had a chance. So you're not playing the Detroit Lions, who just always find a way to win. And at some point today, maybe we'll get into Dan Campbell's decision at the end of that game, because I think you expect me to feel a certain way about it, and I'm going to probably feel the exact opposite. So we'll file that one away, and maybe we'll get to that at the end of the show with the leftovers. But you're not facing the Lions. You're not facing the Eagles, who would be a tough team to face right now with how well they've been playing. You're playing the Seattle Seahawks, who are one game better than you in the standings. And yes, they have beaten you already this season. But this is the same Seahawks team that at home lost to the Giants. This is a Seattle team that is hot right now. They've won 3 in a row. Beat San Francisco on a walk-off in San Francisco, took care of you up in Seattle 2 weeks ago, and then last week went to New Jersey and beat the Jets. So they are a team that is riding hot coming into your building. The question we asked in the tease before the break, how well suited are the Cardinals for the pressure? Because this is the first big litmus test. This game is going to teach us a lot, I think, about Jonathan Gannon, because we can come in here weeks 1 through 10. We could have come in here last year throughout the season, and we could have dissected the coaching decisions. And we could have said, hey, we agree with this coaching decision from Jonathan Gannon. We think that was a terrible fourth down decision. That was a terrible challenge. That was a terrible roster move. Your play calling was too conservative. We can do all of that. We could have done it all last year. We could have done it this year. I don't know how, and if there's trends with those things, if they happen regularly, then yes, I think you can put stock into them early in the season when you build up a big enough sample size. But I want to see how you coach a big game. I want to see how you handle a big game. Do you completely change up your coaching style? Do you completely change up how aggressive you are? Do you take the points when you need to take the points? Do you turn that dial up and maybe go for it early in a game because you feel the momentum's on your side? How do you coach a big game? That teaches us a lot about a head coach. And so I'll go on record. This game is going to teach us a lot about the future of Jonathan Gannon here in Arizona. If we see a calm, cool, poised, under control coach who understands the situation, understands the team. And I'll tell you this, I thought we had that in the first half against Minnesota. We didn't really get into it earlier in the week because they just blew the lead late. But I thought there was too much criticism about the way Jonathan Gannon handled the early part of the game, because he settled for field goals a bunch, didn't necessarily go for it in some spots where maybe you thought he should have. I liked, and I'm normally the biggest proponent of going for it in those spots, but I liked a coach who felt like, you know what? The way this game is right now, points are at a premium. Our defense is doing what they need to do. Like, let's not put zeros up on the board. Let's take 3. I actually thought he was reading the game and reading the feel pretty well. Do I think he gets a little too conservative at times? Absolutely. I think there are times where he can be aggressive and he isn't. I think the end of the game where they decided to kick that field goal to go up 6 is an example of you probably should have gone for it. Go for the touchdown to really put the icing on top of the cake to make it really difficult for Minnesota to come back, because that opened the door for everything that transpired after that moment. We're going to learn a lot on Sunday about Jonathan Gannon. We're going to see how he handles this pressure, because you lose, 17% chance you make the playoffs, according to the models. You win, 71% chance. Jonathan Gannon's probably not getting much sleep this week. There is a pit in his stomach. I'll tell you, the first time we did this show, I love this. This has been a passion of mine since I was 8 years old. I have always known I wanted to be in front of a microphone talking about sports. The first day, and I've done it before, but the night before the first show, I had a pit in my stomach. The anxiety, the pressure of this is a big moment. This is a big deal. For the Cardinals on Sunday, this is their big moment. This is the big deal for them in the 2024 campaign. This is the big deal for them in the 2024 season. Do they take that anxiety? Do they take that pit in their stomach and they turn it into a fuel, a fire that allows them to play with some passion at home? Because these last 2 games that have been somewhat of a disaster on the road, you return home. This is going to be one of the more electric crowds you have seen all season. They're going to understand the momentum. They're going to understand the importance of the game when they walk into that building. And you have to play 4 quarters of good football to get to 7-6 and put yourself in the best position you've been in all season. And this team that relies on their defense, that relies on the running game, is well suited to calm the game down, to slow the game down, to play the game at their speed, their tempo, and deal with this pressure. Do they do it? That is the $64,000 question that we get answered on Sunday.